as the student and reporter. Hill. Mr. Carnegie, you have said that creative vision is one of the principles of individual achievement. Will you analyze this principle and describe how one may make practical use of it? Carnegie. First of all, let us have a clear understanding of the meaning of the term creative vision as we are here using it, by explaining that this is not merely another name for imagination. It is the ability to recognize opportunities and take action to benefit from them. An important element of creative vision is the...
Hey guys, welcome to Dream Journal episode 43, I believe. Yeah, it should be 43. This is your host, Kareem Christmas, coming to you out of Edinburgh, Texas, on a beautiful Tuesday afternoon. So today is August the 31st, last day of August. September should be a pretty good month for crypto. As you guys have seen, NFTs have been blowing up like crazy recently with the Bored Ape Yacht Club and CryptoPunks, with Visa buying their first CryptoPunk. And then even some of the older, like OG NFTs, like, what is it called? Rare Peeps. Like those have even been blowing up recently. So yeah, NFT market's going crazy, crypto art's going crazy. So we're going to be producing some of our own crypto art here soon, coming out with our own NFTs called Crypto Monsters. So today I'm going to be drawing a couple of I'm going to be doing some draft work for the Crypto Monsters, basically. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode. It's going to be a little bit of a switch up from our normal 8-bit art, but yeah, it should be interesting because I don't even know what I'm going to draw yet. It's just going to be a complete free drawing. So hope you guys enjoy. Let me just go ahead and share the stream and then we'll get started. Oh, and by the way, I'm playing an audiobook in the background. This is How to Own Your Own Mind by Napoleon Hill.
Moreover, I shall endeavor to describe how this ability may be developed and made to serve practical ends. Hill. Which of the two types of imagination is used more often in the field of industry and in the ordinary walks of life?
Okay, so that's Twitter.
Synthetic imagination is more common.
We're streaming on Facebook, Twitch. Yeah, I won't share it on
is used only by those who have attained the means
on Snapchat today. Just go ahead and free draw. So yeah, Crypto Monsters. New idea from one of my friends named Chris. What I'm thinking is we're doing 3 different designs. So 3 design. Let me go ahead and open up the stream so I can see if I'm filming.
By studying his achievements, we shall see how he made use of both types of imagination, although he used the synthetic type more often. His first invention to attract worldwide attention was created by bringing together in a new combination 2 old and well-known principles. I refer to the incandescent electric lamp.
Okay, so we're going to have an 8-bit design, a monster design, and a normal design. So here I'll be drawing the monsters. First one's going to be Bitcoin, which I'm thinking of doing like a fire T-Rex. Not I guess pun intended for that one. But I want to do like a bone T-Rex on fire for the OG.
And I may as well here call your attention to the fact that
and we'll put it in orange fire.
Imagination seldom quit trying until they find the answer to their problems. Mr. Edison
Actually, let me draw this a lot bigger.
Incandescent electric lamp by combining 2 well-known principles in a new way. The first of these principles was the established fact that by applying electric energy to both ends of a piece of wire, a resistance is established through which the wire becomes heated to a white glow that will produce light. That principle
I'm using the Jurassic Park
experiments with the electric lamp, but the trouble
image as like a, what do you call it, as a reference.
to control the heat.
So if I'm drawing, if it looks like I'm drawing like weird,
That no form of
it's because I'm
other substance
referencing
could be found
an image.
that could carry the necessary amount of heat to make a satisfactory light for more than a few seconds. The intense heat of the electricity soon burned out the metal. After trying every known substance he could find, with without discovering anything that would serve.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, let me go ahead and share this on Snapchat because one of my friends might want to watch it. Give me 1 sec.
To give the answer to his problem. I say he stumbled upon it, but perhaps that is not the precise way the principle came.
Oh, shoot, what idea.
Which proved to be the answer to his problem. I say he stumbled upon it, but perhaps that is not the precise way the principle came to his attention. Of that, I shall have more to say later on. At any rate, there came into his mind the well-known principle by which charcoal is produced, and he recognized in it the answer to the problem that had caused him more than 10,000 failures. Briefly explained, charcoal is produced by placing a pile of wood on the ground, setting it on fire, and then covering the whole pile with dirt. The dirt permits just enough air to pass through to the fire to keep it alive and smoldering, but not enough to enable the fire to blaze. The smoldering process continues until the wood becomes charred through and through, leaving the log intact in the form of a substance known as charcoal. You of course learned in the study of physics that where there is no oxygen, there can be no fire. But by controlling the inflow of oxygen, the amount of heat of the fire can be controlled proportionately. Mr. Edison had known of this principle long before he began experimenting with the electric lamp, but not until after he had gone through thousands of tests did he think of it as being the principle for which he was searching. As soon as this principle was recognized as the one for which he was searching, he went into his laboratory, placed a coiled wire in a bottle, pumped out all the air, sealed the bottle with wax, applied the electric energy to the two ends of the wire, and lo, the world's first successful incandescent electric lamp was born. The crudely constructed lamp burned for more than 8 hours. Of course, it is obvious as to what had happened. By placing the wire in a vacuum that contained no oxygen, it could be heated sufficiently to cause it to produce a light without its burning out entirely, as it had done when left in the open air. That same principle is used in the making of all incandescent electric lamps today, although the method has been greatly refined until the modern electric lamp is much more efficient than it was when Edison first discovered how to control the heat. Now, let us go back to the question as to how Mr. Edison came to think of combining these two old principles in a new way. I said he stumbled upon the idea of using the charcoal principle as a means of controlling the heat of the electric energy. But that is not exactly the way this idea occurred to him. Here begins, then, the entry into the picture of the principle of creative imagination. By his repetition of thought in connection with his problem, carried on over a long period of time through thousands of experiments, Mr. Edison either consciously or unconsciously charged his subconscious mind with a clear picture of his problem, and, by some queer power which no one understands, his subconscious mind handed over to him the solution to his problem in the form of a hunch that caused him to think of the charcoal principle. In describing the experience many years afterward, Mr. Edison said that when the hunch came to him, he recognized it immediately as being the missing link for which he had been searching. Moreover, he felt assured it would work, even before he tested it. He made the further significant statement that when the idea of using the charcoal principle flashed into his mind, it brought with it a feeling of assurance of its suitability, such as did not accompany any of the other thousands of similar ideas he had tested through synthetic imagination. From this statement, we may draw the conclusion that the subconscious mind not only has the power to create the solution to problems, but it also has a means of forcing one to recognize the solution when it is presented to the conscious mind. Wherever you find a prosperous business, you will come upon some individual who has creative vision. Hill. From what you have said, Mr. Carnegie, I conclude that persistence was of the essence of Mr. Edison's discovery of the solution to his problem. Carnegie. Yes, and some other factors too. First of all, he began his research with definiteness of purpose. thus applying perhaps the most important of the principles of individual achievement. He knew the nature of his problem, but equally as important as this, he was determined to find its solution. Therefore, he backed his definiteness of purpose with an obsessional desire for its attainment. Obsessional desire is the state of mind which serves to clear the mind of fear and doubt and self-imposed limitations, thereby opening the way for that state of mind known as faith. By his refusal to accept defeat through more than 10,000 failures, Mr. Edison prepared his mind for the application of faith. Hill. Were all of Mr. Edison's inventions created through the joint application of creative imagination and synthetic imagination, as in the case of the incandescent electric lamp? Carnegie. Oh no, not by any means. The majority of his inventions were created solely through the aid of synthetic imagination by the trial and error method of experimentation. But he did complete one invention solely through the aid of creative imagination. And as far as I know, this was the only invention he perfected through this principle alone. I have reference to the phonograph. That was a new idea. No one before Edison, as far as is known, had ever produced a machine that would record and reproduce the vibrations of sound. Hill. What technique did Mr. Edison use in the application of creative imagination in perfecting the talking machine? Carnegie. The technique was very simple. He impressed his subconscious mind with the idea of a talking machine, and there passed over to his conscious mind a perfect plan for the building of such a machine. Hill. Do you mean that Edison relied on creative imagination entirely? Carnegie. Yes, entirely. And one of the strange features of this particular invention of Mr. Edison's is the fact that the plan which his subconscious mind yielded to him worked almost from the first attempt to apply it. The idea of how such a machine could be produced flashed into Edison's mind. He sat down then and there and drew a rough picture of the machine, handed it to his model maker, and asked him to produce the machine, and in a matter of hours it had been finished, tested, and lo, it worked. Of course, the machine was crude, but it was sufficient to prove that Edison's creative imagination had not failed him. Hill. You say that Mr. Edison impressed his subconscious mind with the idea of a talking machine. Now, how did he go about doing this, and how long did it require before his subconscious mind handed over to him the working principle of the machine? Carnegie. I am not sure that Mr. Edison stated exactly how long he had been thinking of such a machine before his subconscious mind picked up his thoughts and translated them into a perfected plan, but I am under the impression it was not more than a few weeks at most, perhaps not more than a few days. His method of impressing his subconscious mind with his desire consisted of a simple procedure of converting that desire into an obsession. That is, the thought of a machine that would record and reproduce sound became the dominating thought of his mind. He focused his mind on it through concentration of his interest and made it the major occupant of his mind from day to day until this form of autosuggestion penetrated his subconscious mind and registered a clear picture of his desire. Hill. Is that the way one connects the conscious mind with the subconscious, Mr. Carnegie? Carnegie. Yes, that is the simplest known method. You see, therefore, why I have emphasized the importance of intensifying one's desires until they become obsessional. A deep, burning desire is picked up by the subconscious and acted upon much more definitely and quickly than an ordinary desire. A mere wish appears to make no impression on the subconscious. Many people become confused as to the difference between a wish and a burning desire, which has been stimulated into obsessional proportions by the repetition of thought in connection with the desire. Hill. If I understand you correctly, Mr. Carnegie, the element of repetition is important. Why? Carnegie. Because repetition of thought creates thought habits in the mind, which cause the mind to go right on working on an idea without one's conscious effort. the subconscious concerns itself first with those thoughts which have become habits, and especially if the thoughts have been strongly emotionalized by a deep and burning desire for their realization. Hill. Then anyone may make use of creative imagination by the simple process of charging his subconscious mind with definite desires? Carnegie. Yes, there is nothing to hinder anyone from using this principle, but you must remember that practical results are obtained only by those who have gained discipline over their thought habits through the process of concentration of interest and desire. Fleeting thoughts which come and go intermittently, and mere wishes, which are about the extent of the average person's thinking, make no impression whatsoever on the subconscious mind. Hill. Will you mention some additional examples of the practical application of the two types of imagination? Carnegie. Well, take the experience of Henry Ford in connection with his perfection of a self-propelled vehicle, for example. The idea of such a vehicle was first suggested to him by a steam-propelled tractor that was being used to haul a threshing machine. From the first time he saw the tractor, his mind began to work on the idea of a horseless buggy. At first, he used only the principle of synthetic imagination by centering his mind on ways and means of converting the steam tractor into a rapid-moving vehicle for the transportation of passengers. The idea became obsessional with him, and it had the effect of conveying his burning desire to his subconscious mind, where it was picked up and acted upon. The action of the subconscious mind suggested to him the use of an internal combustion engine to take the place of the steam engine, and he went to work immediately on the creation of such an engine. Of course, he had the experiments of other men in connection with internal combustion gas engines as a guide, but his problem was to find a way to convey the power of the engine to the wheels of a vehicle. He kept his mind charged with his major purpose until, step by step, his subconscious mind presented him with ideas with which he perfected the planetary system of power transmission, which enabled him to perfect his first working model of an automobile. Hill. Will you describe the major factors which entered into the modus operandi of Mr. Ford's mind while he was perfecting the automobile? Carnegie. Yes, that will be very easy. And when I describe them, you will have a clear understanding of the working principles used by all successful men, as well as a clear picture of the Ford mind, viz. A. Mr. Ford was motivated by a definite purpose, which is the first step in all individual achievements. B. He stimulated his purpose into an obsession by concentrating his thoughts upon it. C. He converted his purpose into definite plans through the principle of organized individual endeavor, and put his plans into action with unabating persistence. D. He made use of the mastermind principle, first by the harmonious aid of his wife, and second by gaining counsel from others who had experimented with internal combustion engines and methods of power transmission. Still later, of course, when he began to produce automobiles for sale, he made a still more extensive use of the mastermind principle by allying himself with the Dodge brothers and their mechanics and engineers skilled in the sort of mechanical problems he had to solve. E. Back of all this effort was the power of applied faith, which he acquired as the result of his intense desire for achievement in connection with his definite major purpose. Hill. Summarized briefly, Mr. Ford's success was due to his having adopted a definite major purpose, which he fanned into a white-heat flame of obsession, thus leading to the stimulation of both the faculties of synthetic imagination and creative imagination. Does that state the facts? Carnegie. That tells the story in one sentence. The part of the story that should be emphasized is the fact that Mr. Ford moved with persistence. At first, he met with one form of defeat after another. One of his major difficulties was lack of capital with which to carry on his research before he perfected his automobile. After that came a still greater difficulty in connection with procuring the necessary operating capital to produce his automobiles in quantity production. Then followed a series of difficulties, such as disagreements with the members of his mastermind group and other similar problems, all of which called for persistence and determination. These qualities Mr. Ford possesses, and I think we might say that he owes his success to his ability to know exactly what he wants, and his capacity to stand by what he wants with unrelenting persistence. If one single quality stands out in the Ford character above all others, it is his capacity for persistence. Let me remind you again that definiteness of purpose, backed with a form of persistence that assumes the proportions of an obsession, is the greatest of all stimulants of both the synthetic and the creative forms of imagination. The mind of man is provided with a power which forces the subconscious mind to accept and to act upon obsessional desires that are definitely planned. Hill, will you now cite some other examples of the practical application of imagination? Carnegie. Take, for example, Dr. Alexander Graham Bell's research in connection with the modern telephone. Here we have an example of the use of creative imagination, for Bell's invention was new. Let us say that he, like Edison, stumbled upon the principle that made the telephone practical while searching for some mechanical device with which he could create a hearing aid for his wife, whose hearing was impaired. Here again, we find a man who was inspired by a definite purpose which assumed obsessional proportions. His keen sympathy for his wife was the factor that gave obsessional force to his purpose. In this case, as in all others where men give obsessional proportions to their desires, a definite motive was behind his desire. Motive is the beginning of all desires. Through a long period of research that is too involved in details for description here, Dr. Bell's subconscious mind finally presented him with an idea which served his purpose. It became known to the scientific world as Bell's experiment, the substance of which was this. A ray of light is cast upon a plate of selenium, which sends the ray back to another plate some distance away of the same metal. This latter communicates with a galvanic battery to which a telephone is attached. The words uttered behind the first plate are distinctly heard through the telephone at the end of the second plate. The ray of light, accordingly, has served as a telephone wire. The sound waves have become transformed into light waves, the latter into galvanic waves, and these have become once again sound waves. Thus, a new principle for conveying sound waves was uncovered. It has been claimed that the principle, in part, was suggested to Dr. Bell by the experiments of a man by the name of Dolbear. There was a lawsuit over the priority of right to the principle, but Mr. Dolbear lost the suit, and Dr. Bell was declared to have been the discoverer of the working principle of the modern telephone. At any rate, Dr. Bell's desire for a mechanical hearing aid for his wife, backed by a persistent search for such a device, led to the discovery of the principle he needed. It must be remembered that the subconscious mind makes use of every practical means available for revealing knowledge to those seeking it with obsessional desire. It performs no miracles, but it makes intelligent use of all practical media available in carrying out its purpose. Hill. Now, Mr. Carnegie, let us get away from the field of invention and see how the principle of imagination may be applied in the less complicated fields of endeavor. Carnegie. Very well. Take, for example, the first great mail order house that was established in the United States. Here we have a fine example of synthetic imagination applied to merchandising. A telegraph operator with whom I formerly worked found that he had extra time on his hands which he could not use in connection with his duties as railroad telegrapher. Being a man with an inquisitive type of mind, he began to search for something he could do that would keep him occupied and at the same time add to his income. Here again, the question of motive entered the picture, the motive of financial gain. After having turned the matter over in his mind for several months, He envisioned a profitable outlet for his efforts by using the idle telegraph line for the purpose of selling watches to his fellow operators in his division. So he ordered half a dozen watches
So that's
at
draft
wholesale
one,
rates,
and then we
began
have
to
like
offer
an
them for
8-bit.
sale. The idea caught fire from the very beginning. In a very short time, he had sold all 6 of the watches. Then, spurred on by his success, his imagination began to expand until he took on other items of jewelry. Everything went well, and he was doing a land office business until his superintendent found out what he was up to and fired him on the spot. Every adversity brings with it the seed of an equivalent benefit. Out of this telegrapher's adversity was born the first great mail order house. He switched his method of selling from telegraphy to the mails, using at first a mimeographed catalog of his wares. Moreover, he added others outside the field of telegraphers to his list of prospective buyers, mainly people living in the villages and rural districts. In a little while, his business had grown to where he could afford a printed catalog illustrated with pictures of his merchandise. From that point on, the story is known to millions of people throughout the United States who now purchase merchandise from the mail order house he established. He then took a partner into the business with him, thereby making use of the mastermind principle. This partner proved to be a veritable gold mine because he had a keen sense of advertising. Several years later, the business was sold out to a corporation at a price which made its owners multimillionaires. That was the beginning of mail-order merchandising on a large scale. Now, there was nothing very mysterious about this man's success. He simply put his mind to work on a definite purpose and kept behind that purpose until it made him rich. He did not create anything new. He merely put an old idea to a new use. In this manner, many of the great fortunes have been accumulated. Hill. If I understand you correctly, Mr. Carnegie, the telegraph operator applied only the principle of synthetic imagination. Is that correct? Carnegie. Yes, that is it. You see, he did nothing except apply the principle of merchandising in a new way. But do not forget that this is about all that most successful men do. Rarely do men create new ideas through the application of creative imagination, as Dr. Bell and Mr. Edison did. Now, let us take the modern railroad refrigerator car, for example. The man who first made practical application of this principle revolutionized the meatpacking business. He was a packer whose business was limited due to the fact that he could ship fresh meat only a short distance. Motivated by a desire to expand his business over a greater territory, he began to search for a suitable method. A man generally finds whatever he is looking for if he gives his desire obsessional proportions. Well, this packer was motivated by the desire for larger financial gains, so he kept his mind on his problem until it occurred to him to convert an ordinary railroad boxcar into an oversized icebox. There was nothing left to be done except to go to work and experiment with the idea, which he proceeded to do. The plan worked satisfactorily, although the first refrigerator car was a very crude affair. He kept on improving his idea until he had refined it into the modern refrigerator car as we know it today. His idea not only helped him to expand his meat business almost without limitation, but it gave a new impetus to the sale and distribution of other lines of merchandise, particularly fruits and vegetables, until today, that single idea has added hundreds of millions of dollars of wealth to individuals, corporations, and the nation as a whole. The refrigerator car was brought into existence solely by the application of synthetic imagination through the simple process of placing an icebox on wheels, so to speak. George Pullman performed a similar feat by placing beds in railroad coaches, thus converting them into sleeping quarters. There was nothing new about either the beds or the railroad coaches, but the idea of combining these two types of service was new. The new combination made the man who created it an immense fortune, to say nothing of providing thousands of jobs for others and a desirable service for the traveling public, for which it continues to pay a huge sum annually. Ideas such as these are the products of imagination. The man who trains his mind to create ideas or to give old ideas a new and better use is well on the road toward economic independence. Back of these ideas was the personal initiative of the men who created them, plus the principle of organized individual endeavor through which they were made practical. Both the sleeping car and the refrigerator car had to be promoted and sold, thus necessitating the investment of large amounts of capital. Both of these ideas, and all other similar ideas that are made practical, require the application of some combination of the principles of individual achievement. But in final analysis, such ideas generally can be traced back to their originating source in the imagination of one person. Bill, will you name the success principles which are most commonly used by those who apply the principle of imagination? Carnegie. Well, that depends somewhat on the nature of the application that is to be made of imagination and the person making it, but generally speaking, the following are the principles which are more often allied with imagination. A. Definiteness of purpose. The motive which more commonly serves to stimulate the imagination is that of a desire for financial gain. The profit motive has been, without a doubt, the greatest inspiration to the men who have developed industrial America. B. The mastermind principle, through which men go into a huddle and frankly exchange thoughts with the object of solving business or professional problems, is also a great stimulation of the imagination. It was this principle, more than all others, through which the steel industry, of which I was the founder, became prosperous. The so-called round table is a great institution. When men sit down and begin to pool their ideas in a spirit of harmony and oneness of purpose, they soon find a solution to most of the problems that confront them, no matter what business they may be engaged in or what may be the nature of their problems. C. Going the extra mile comes in prominently for its share of credit as a stimulant to the imagination. When a man makes it a habit to do more than he is paid for, he generally begins to draw upon his imagination for new sources through which to render this sort of service. This fact alone would be sufficient compensation for going the extra mile, even if there were not still greater benefits available. D. Applied faith is a definite source of stimulation of the imagination. Moreover, it is an essential in connection with the stimulation and application of creative imagination. Men with little or no faith will never receive the benefits of creative imagination. E. Organized individual endeavor depends directly upon the application of imagination for its effectiveness, as all forms of definite planning are carried on through imagination. When you pray, do not ask for more blessings, but ask for more wisdom, so that you may better understand and enjoy the blessings you already have. There are many other sources of stimulation of the imagination, but these 5 are on the must list. Fear sometimes stimulates the imagination, while of course at other times it paralyzes the imagination. When a man is in great danger, his imagination often performs seemingly superhuman feats, especially where self-preservation is the motive. Failure and temporary defeat sometimes have the effect of stirring one's imagination, although more often they have the opposite effect. The question method, which master salesmen often resort to, has the effect of arousing the imagination and putting it to work, and the reason for this is obvious. By asking questions, the salesman forces his prospective buyer to think. Moreover, he chooses the line of thought to be engaged in by the adroitness of his questions. Curiosity often stimulates imagination to a high pitch. Curiosity, growing out of death and the uncertainty of life, and the unknown and perhaps unknowable facts of immortality, has been the chief source of inspiration out of which all the religions have grown. Self-expression through speaking and writing is a never-ending source of stimulation of the imagination, as are many other forms of action. The very moment a man begins to organize his thoughts for the purpose of expression, whether through words or deeds, he starts his imagination to work. For this reason, children should be encouraged to give free expression to their thoughts, as this develops imagination early in life. Hunger is a universal source of inspiration of imagination. When a man needs food, his imagination goes to work automatically, without any form of urge. In the lower order of life, instinct goes to work in the face of hunger, and I have known of ingenious applications of instinct under such an urge. Thus we see that wherever we touch life, whether in man or the lower orders of organized life, imagination and instinct may be found as essential parts of the individual's working equipment. Concentration of attention on a definite problem or object tends to put the imagination to work immediately. Witness, for example, the astounding achievements of Dr. Elmer R. Gates, who created hundreds of useful inventions by sitting for ideas. The same principle was used by Thomas A. Edison and Dr. Alexander Graham Bell. By fixing their minds on definite objectives through definiteness of purpose, they put creative imagination to work with far-reaching results. Scientists, and perhaps some laymen, put their imaginations to work by setting up hypotheses of facts or ideas which, for the time being, they assume to exist. Scientific research and experiment would hardly be practical if hypothetical cases were not utilized, as often the facts for which they are searching are entirely unknown. Lawyers and trial judges often resort to the use of hypotheses in order to establish facts that cannot be uncovered through any other source. The chemist and the physicist resort to the same method when searching for unknown facts. And so does the doctor when other means of diagnosis of disease fail. Detectives often work entirely through the aid of hypotheses in the solution of crime. Right after the war between the states, a foundry owner purchased a large quantity of unused cannonballs, which he wished to melt for other uses. Before the balls could be melted conveniently, they had to be broken into small pieces. There seemed to be no way to do the job except by hiring men to break the balls with heavy hammers, until a man with imagination came along, looked the cannonballs over, discovered that they were hollow inside, and made a very low bid for breaking the entire lot. Moreover, he astonished the foundry man by guaranteeing to break the entire lot himself and to do it by the following morning. He was given the contract, after which he turned all the balls so the small opening in each appeared on the top side. Then, to the amazement of everyone, he calmly filled the balls with water. The night was very cold, and the following morning, the foundry man found every ball nicely broken by the expansion of the frozen contents. His only comment was, "Why didn't I think of that in the first place?" We all have occasion at times to wonder why we haven't used our own imagination when we see others making profitable use of theirs. Hill. Why is it that so few people appear to have a well-developed imagination? Is the capacity for a keen imagination a matter of heredity, Mr. Carnegie? Carnegie. No. The faculty of imagination, like all other faculties of the mind, can be developed through use. The reason so many people seem not to have a keen imagination is obvious. Most people allow the faculty of imagination to atrophy through neglect. Hill. Inasmuch as everyone must use salesmanship in one way or another, will you illustrate how imagination can be used in selling? Carnegie. Yes, I can give you an endless number of examples of this sort. Take the case of a life insurance agent whom I know, for instance. He began selling insurance after an accident which incapacitated him from any sort of heavy manual labor, and within a year, he became the high man in sales in the entire United States in his company. I will give you one illustration that will tell the story of his success. But before I do so, I think I should tell you that this man became a master at applying the mastermind principle. He also became equally proficient in applying many of the other principles of achievement, among them organized thought. One day, he walked into the office of a very distinguished and wealthy lawyer and came out within half an hour
Maybe I could
with
do.
an application for $1 million policy on the lawyer's life.
Yeah, the
Although the
person.
lawyer was known to have refused to purchase insurance from a half dozen or more of the ablest insurance men in the city in which he lived.
Let's see.
And this is the way he did it. He carried with him a fully illustrated newspaper feature story of the lawyer's activities, set in type with a heavy streamer headline which read, "Prominent lawyer insures his brains for $1 million." The story told how the lawyer had come up from the bottom through his unusual skill as a corporation attorney until he was in a position where he commanded the most select clientele in New York City. The story was well written. It carried pictures of the lawyer and the members of his family, including a picture of his Long Island estate. He handed the story to the lawyer and said, "I have made arrangements for this story to be released in over 100 newspapers the moment you prove that you can pass the necessary physical examination. I hardly need to suggest to a man of your intelligence that the story will bring you enough new clients to more than pay the premium on the insurance policy." The lawyer sat down and read the story carefully. When he had finished, he asked how the insurance man had procured so much information about him and how he managed to get those pictures of his family. "Oh," replied the insurance man, "that was easy. I simply made arrangements with a newspaper syndicate to do the job." The lawyer read the story a second time, made a few corrections in it, handed it back and said, "Let's have your application blank." The sale was closed in a few minutes, but more than 3 months of preparation went into it before the insurance agent made his call. He left no detail unattended. He made it his business to find out all about the lawyer before the story was written, and saw to it that the story was so prepared that it got under the lawyer's skin at his weakest point, which was his desire for publicity. What he really sold the lawyer was not an insurance policy on his life, but an insurance policy on his vanity. That streamer headline turned the trick. Moreover, the salesman not only earned a fat premium on the sale, but he received $500 from the newspaper syndicate for the exclusive use of the story. Now, that was imagination, or I miss my guess. Salesmen with imagination often sell something entirely different from that which they appear to be selling. The experience of Dr. Harper, a former president of the University of Chicago, aptly illustrates what I mean. Dr. Harper was one of the greatest endowment getters the educational world has ever known. He took a notion to build a new building on the campus that required $1 million endowment. If you wish to see imagination as it is employed by a master, observe the technique through which he got his $1 million. Observe also how many of the principles of individual achievement he applied in addition to his imagination. First of all, he chose his prospective donors with adroitness, confining the number to 2 well-known Chicago men, both of whom were quite able to donate $1 million. It could not have been purely accidental that these 2 men were known to be bitter enemies. One was a professional politician, and the other was the head of the Chicago street railway system. For years, these 2 men had been fighting each other, a fact which would have meant nothing to anyone with less imagination than Dr. Harper possessed. One day, precisely at 12 o'clock, Dr. Harper strolled into the office of the streetcar magnate, found no one on duty at the outer door, which was exactly as he expected the situation to be, and walked into the streetcar man's private office unannounced. The magnate looked up from his desk, but before he had time to protest, the super salesman said, "I beg your pardon for walking in unannounced, but I found no one in the outer office. My name is Dr. Harper, and I just called to see you for a minute." "Please be seated," said the streetcar man. "No, thank you," replied the educator. "I have only a minute, so I will tell you what I have in mind and then be on my way. I have been thinking for some time that the University of Chicago should do something to recognize you for the wonderful job you have done in giving the city the finest street railway system in America, and I had in mind honoring you with a building on the campus to be named for you. When I mentioned the matter to our board, one of the members had the same idea, but he wanted us to honor naming the streetcar man's enemy. So I just came in to tell you what had happened, with the hope that you might find some way to help me defeat this board member's plan. Well, exclaimed the streetcar man, that is an interesting idea. Do please be seated, and let us see what we can work out, will you? I am very sorry, the educator apologized, but I have another engagement in a few minutes, and I must hurry on to it. But I tell you what I suggest. You think the matter over during the night, and telephone me in the morning if any plan comes to mind that might help me to get the right man's name on that building. Good day, sir. Without leaving any opening for further conversation, the master of imagination bowed himself out. The next morning, when he arrived at his office at the university, he found the streetcar man awaiting him. The two men walked inside, remained there about an hour, after which they walked out again, both of them smiling. Dr. Harper carried a check in his hand, waving it back and forth in the air to block it. The check was for $1 million. The streetcar man had found a way to beat his enemy to the draw, as the clever Dr. Harper figured he would do. Moreover, he had sealed the bargain by delivering the money with the understanding that Dr. Harper would become personally responsible for its acceptance. Now, if it is salesmanship based on imagination that you want, here you have it. Those who knew the streetcar man best said that no other plan that could have been conceived would have succeeded. And that is another thing about these men who develop imagination through its use. They generally know the precise plan that will work. This is an essential part of their training. Hill. Was Dr. Harper's success solely the result of his understanding and use of imagination, or did other factors enter into it? Carnegie. In his case, I would say that he used creative vision, and not just imagination alone. Hill. What is the difference between imagination and creative vision? The two terms appear to be synonymous. Carnegie. No, they are not the same. Creative vision is an acquired ability through which one does two very important things, viz., first, he becomes keenly alert in recognizing opportunities favorable to the attainment of his aims and purposes. Second, he develops the habit of embracing these opportunities and acting upon them through organized individual endeavor. Edison had the persistence to keep on trying in the face of 10,000 failures. Andrew Carnegie. A man may have a very keen imagination in connection with some specialized line of work or some technical subject, such for example as the inventor, but he may be entirely lacking in the creative vision and action necessary to commercialize his inventive ability. We find this to be true of many inventors. A man may have keen imagination as an artist, as in fact most artists do have, yet be entirely lacking in the creative vision necessary to make a business success of his artistic ability. Do you see the point? Hill. Yes, I see the point plainly. What other factors are associated with creative vision? Carnegie. Well, the best answer I can give you is to describe the procedure of the man who has creative vision. You will observe, from my description, that creative vision overlaps many of the other principles of individual achievement. First, the man with creative vision, such a man as Dr. Harper, develops the alertness of mind to recognize opportunities favorable to his own advancement. Second, he moves with definiteness of purpose in embracing opportunities. Third, he plans every move he makes through organized endeavor. Fourth, he recognizes and uses the mastermind principle, through which he provides himself with the ability and the knowledge of others. Fifth, he removes limitations from his own mind by recognizing and using applied faith, thereby opening his mind for the guidance of infinite intelligence. No man may possess creative vision without the aid of faith, and this for the reason that faith is of the essence of creative ability. Sixth, he adopts and follows the habit of going the extra mile, thereby attracting favorable opportunities to himself. 7th, he keeps his mind definitely attuned to the circumstances and conditions of those around him, observing not only the general trend of the times, but watching closely the problems, needs, and desires of people in general. 8th, he moves on his own personal initiative without being urged to do so. 9th, he assumes full responsibility for his own deeds and depends upon the soundness of his own judgment in the formation of his plans, having first wisely availed himself of the counsel of others through the mastermind principle. 10th, he develops and uses both the faculties of synthetic imagination and creative imagination. Take notice, however, that these two factors constitute but 1/10 of the principles used by the man of creative vision. I think this should give you a fair understanding of the difference between imagination and creative vision. Hill: yes, the difference is clear. It is also very great. I suppose this answers my question as to why there are so few people who appear to use imagination. Carnegie: what you really meant to say was that there are so few people who use creative vision. All normal people use imagination to one extent or another, but few make use of creative vision. As I have clearly shown, imagination is but one of the factors of creative vision. Industrial America, as we know it today, is the handiwork of men with creative vision. When men with this sort of vision put money to work, they create wealth in its most useful form. Wealth in the form of employment, wealth in the form of high standards of living, wealth in the form of education embracing experience and skill in every walk of life. Men with creative vision are builders.
MetaMask
They
Dragon.
never tear down.
Let's
They are
see.
positive, not negative. They build our great railway systems. They construct our skyscrapers and extend the boundaries of our great metropolitan cities. They gave us the telephone and the airplane and the automobile and the multiferous devices for harnessing and using electricity. They also gave us the most efficient system of government known to the civilized world, under which every American citizen has the privilege of exercising his personal initiative to the fullest extent of his creative vision and his individual ability.
Let me zoom in.
When you look under the surface of this thing called creative vision, you find it to be the forerunner of civilization. Back through the ages, we may find evidence that civilization has evolved through the leadership of a relatively small number of men. These were men with creative vision, whose alertness of mind kept them always ahead of the masses. Such men were Samuel Adams, Richard Henry Lee, Thomas Jefferson, John Hancock, George Washington, Thomas Paine, and the other great patriots of their time who risked life and fortune to give birth to the America we know today. Measure these men by their deeds and see how definitely they used the 10 factors of creative vision, which I have mentioned. Hill: what causes men to develop creative vision, Mr. Carnegie? Or is this an inborn trait with which only a few men are gifted? Carnegie: I can answer your question best by referring you to the basic motives behind all actions. Motive is the mainspring of all human endeavor. Take any man who is known to possess creative vision, analyze him carefully, and you find that he has been spurred on by some impelling motive. The major motive of the men who gave this nation its liberty was the desire for liberty and freedom. The motive of the great industrial leaders who gave us our industrial America was a desire for financial gain, popularly known as the profit motive. In many instances, these men were moved by the desire for self-expression, which is another of the basic motives. But always there was present a definite motive which inspired our leaders to action. One of the greatest of the factors of the American way of life is that our entire economic system and our form of government are so designed and operated that they provide premiums and rewards for the expression of personal initiative. The profit motive and personal initiative are inseparable. Under the American way of life, the profit motive is the greatest of all the motives which inspire personal initiative. If this motive were killed off or subdued, the greatest source of our national wealth would be likewise depreciated. I wish to emphasize this point because I can see a tendency toward habits and practices which discourage men from exercising their personal initiative. Some men have the false notion that by limiting the amount of work one man is permitted to do, new jobs are created. Without going into a detailed analysis of this philosophy, I can tell you that the man who permits anyone to limit the amount of service he renders thereby fixes a definite limitation.
This is like a crappy MetaMask, but I'm
that
trying.
limitation usually is somewhere in the neighborhood of the bare necessities of life, and no more. Men with creative vision never limit the amount of service they render. On the contrary, they extend their services in every direction possible by going the extra mile. There is no other way by which a man can make the fullest use of his privilege of personal initiative. To get more from life, one must give more. This is a truism from which no man can escape. Nature fixed it in all natural laws. Therefore, it is not a man-made rule. Hill. Then it would be unfortunate if our form of government were so changed that it would discourage people of the United States from embracing and acting upon this law. Carnegie. Not merely unfortunate, but tragic. If you examine the foundation stones of Americanism carefully, you will see that the entire American way of life provides every individual with adequate rewards for embracing and using the best motives. Nowhere in the economic setup will you find anything that discourages men from backing their personal initiative with these motives. And I may add,
It's gonna look like a bat rather than a dragon.
Living is due entirely to the fact that the American form of government has been so designed that it encourages individuals to use these motives. Hill. Do you believe, Mr. Carnegie, that the American way of life, as it has been provided under our form of government, is responsible for the fact that this nation is distinguished throughout the world because of the great number of men with creative vision of whom we can boast? Carnegie. You have hit the nail right on the head by that question. Yes, without a doubt, the supremacy of American industry and our leadership in other directions are due to the encouragement provided by our form of government. Read the Constitution of the United States carefully and observe with significance how clearly it is provided for the protection of the right of free enterprise and the privilege of personal initiative. Now, examine carefully the elements of creative vision and note how all of these lead inevitably to the question of personal initiative. Take that privilege away from a man, or limit it in any manner, and you strike at the very heart of the greatest privilege that is available to the American people. It has been the personal initiative of the great leaders that has made America the envy of the rest of the world. From this conclusion there is no escape, try as we may to avoid it. Hill. I understand that you encouraged the members of
The
your
MetaMasked dragon
to become wealthy. Your policy of overpaying your associates for going the extra mile was your method of encouraging personal initiative. Is that the idea? Carnegie. That's the idea precisely. There is only one satisfactory way to get men to do their best, and that is by setting up before them a motive which is sufficiently attractive to inspire them to act on their own initiative. The nature and scope of the motive must be measured by the potential ability and the personal characteristics of the man whom it is intended to inspire. This is usually determined by an individual's ambitions and personal limitations. Some men aspire only to acquire economic security. Still others are self-limited by a desire for only the necessities of life. Others want great riches, and they can be moved by no other motive than that of abundance. However, I must tell you that of all the thousands of associate workers who have been connected with my industry, less than 50 of them were motivated
what do you think
by
about that?
desire for great riches.
MetaMask
I
dragon.
helped more than 40 of these to attain the object of their desires by becoming
Try cooking
millionaires or better.
MetaMask dragon.
8 or 10 others had the desire for great riches.
You meant Monero. I figured you meant Monero, but I was like,
Because they
let's
neglected
try
to
MetaMask
apply the
anyways.
rules of individual achievement which would have entitled them to it.
Yeah, it looks the MetaMask dragon.
It's interesting to know that most of those who fell by the wayside after they had gone a long distance toward the attainment of their desire did so because they became neglectful of the principle of going the extra mile. Success had the reverse effect on them to that which it should have had. It caused them to begin thinking.
You're able to see it clearly,
for
right?
what they
I can't
knew,
tell
instead of that which they did
on the replay.
or induced others to do. This is a mistake which
Yeah,
is fatal to many who make a good
I don't know.
start towards success, but slow down when they
Just
come
some
to
drafts.
sight of it.
What else?
Hill,
What else can I draw?
Mr. Carnegie, aren't there
I
some
have like
employers who
another
set arbitrary limitations
20
on the
minutes
amount
or
of
something,
money
or
that
probably
employers
less than that.
associate workers
A
to
couple
make?
more minutes until my alarm goes off.
Yes, there are many such.
So-
But name me one of them, if you can, who has ever
Let's
become
see.
an outstanding success in his field. Success is something which a man has to give away in order to keep it.
I was thinking about doing Satoshi as a zombie. That might look pretty cool, but I wasn't sure how to like zombie him. Try unicorn made of steel.
It will always be so.
I don't even know how to draw
The
that.
founders of this nation recognized this truth and wrote
Steel
it into
unicorn.
the Constitution of the United States.
Oh, for Uniswap?
by providing every citizen
Steel
with the
unicorn.
utmost of personal privileges that could be conceived, with the object of inspiring individuals to aim high and acquire much. Hill, would you say that the men who wrote the Constitution of the United States were men of creative vision? Carnegie, yes, and they were the most outstanding men in this respect that this nation or any other has ever known. Without creative vision, they could not have had the force.
Yep, well, that's actually my alarm. So 4:02.
To prepare a constitution that gives
Oh man,
equal rights
polka
to
dots
all.
up to $30.
Those men were statesmen in the true sense
Good day
of
for
the
that.
word. Today we have many politicians, but few statesmen. If-
Oh, heads up to you guys watching. You should probably unstake some of your cryptos, like Polkadot, because Polkadot has a 28-day unbonding period, which I talk about in my Polkadot versus Cardano video. Shameless plug. But yeah, Polkadot takes like a really long time to unstake. So if you're trying to sell at the peak of the bull run, you don't want to have it still staking. So it might be a good idea to unstake your Polkadot early.
Our overabundance has made us indolent and indifferent. Is that the idea? Carnegie. Yes. It has become so easy for a man to get everything he wants in this country that the pioneering spirit.
Yeah, I'll draw.
for self-determination
I'll try drawing that unicorn off stream. Or actually, let me just do it real quick.
Personal liberty and the right to free enterprise, which were provided by the founders of this nation, have come so easily that the people have begun to mistake their privileges for their license to expect something for nothing. Hill. From your remarks, I draw the conclusion that Uncle Sam's gift of overabundance in the form of personal liberty as provided by the Constitution of the United States sometimes produces the effect of causing his nieces and nephews to look to rich old uncle for what they want, instead of producing it for themselves by rendering useful service. Is that about the story? Carnegie. That's the story exactly. Of course, this trend will right itself in time, but not until the country
that-
is overtaken by some great.
I just got an
national
idea for
emergency
something else.
that will teach the people.
So,
the
for the
fallacy
crypto
of
monster?
expecting something for nothing. This may come in the form of a widespread depression, or it may.
It looks
come
kind of
in
like
the form of
Charizard,
war,
actually.
in which the people will be forced to join forces and fight once more for the privilege of liberty that was given to them.
Sorry, it's not going to be a
in
unicorn, but
But come what may,
I was gonna go with the
there is
idea.
one thing certain. People
Go with the
cannot
flow.
go on forever, cutting down the amount of service they render and demanding more pay without catastrophe overtaking them. Hill. Then you do not think there is anything wrong with the American system of economics, but there is something radically wrong with the people who are living under it. Is that your viewpoint, Mr. Carnegie? Carnegie. That is not merely my viewpoint, but it is the truth. It is little wonder that we have such a comparatively few men with creative vision in view of the overwhelming number of people who are violating every rule of creative vision. There is nothing wrong with our system of government or our economic system, but there is definitely something wrong in the use we are making of these privileges. The mind within itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. John Milton. Hill. Mr. Carnegie, you are the recognized leader in the steel industry. Your achievements in this industry have so far outstripped all others that there is no room for comparison. You have reduced the price of steel from $130 per ton to around $20 per ton. You have made the steel industry the very backbone of American industry. Now, will you tell me how you happen to advance so far ahead of all others engaged in that industry? Carnegie.
I'm trying to do the eye as like Bitcoin or something, but it looks kind of weird.
Vision, which I've mentioned. Hill. Do you mean that you have observed and applied these principles while some of the others engaged in the steel industry have not? Carnegie. Oh, I would not put it just that way. I would rather say that I have applied these principles more persistently than have many of the others. The difference between my achievements and the achievements of others in the steel industry has been due largely to the difference in the application of principles. Hill. Then you do not claim to have greater ability.
Yeah, that's one draft. Here, let me do the unicorn now.
The application of sound principles? Is that the idea? Carnegie. Yes, that is it. And I may add that this same difference in the matter of application of principles is the major difference between those who succeed and those who fail in other walks of life. The principles of successful achievement are as definite as are the rules of mathematics. Some men acquire an understanding of these rules and apply them persistently. Others may understand them, but they apply them with less persistence. Naturally, the more persistent a man is, the greater is the success. Hill. Mr. Carnegie, I have always been interested in understanding more about the transition by which one changes from poverty to riches. Practically every man of great wealth in the United States appears to have started at scratch, with nothing but a sound mind and an opportunity such as every man has under the American way of life. Now, what I would like to know is this. What is the first move a man makes when he is through with poverty and has become determined he will have riches? Where is the precise point at which the transition from poverty takes place, and how may one reach that point? Carnegie. Your questions cover enough ground to keep me busy talking for a solid month, but I will do my best to answer. To begin with, let me answer you categorically by reminding you that it is the burden of the entire philosophy of individual achievement to provide the answer to all your questions. However, I will be more specific and give you at least a starting point from which you may arrive at your own answers. In the first place, a man must have the necessary creative vision to enable him to recognize the particular opportunity for which he is best suited, considering the amount of riches he desires and the kind of service he has to offer in return for the riches. That surely is the first thing to be considered. Next, it is a well-known fact that everyone wishes for riches, but generally the wishes contemplate something for nothing or something greater
Head's a
than
little
the
bit too
value
big.
of that which is to be given
Yeah,
in
it's just a
return.
draft, so I
The
won't worry
second
about it.
step, then,
But
is to
it
kill
head's way
off
too
this
big,
fact
actually.
by recognizing the truth that there is no such reality as something for nothing or something for less than its true value. Hill. I see by the way you were starting off that the question of change from poverty to riches is one of organized preparation. Is that what you are driving at, Mr. Carnegie? Carnegie. Now you have the idea exactly.
Yeah.
Riches do
Oh,
not
no.
come from wishing. They come from a more substantial source, the nature of which I shall try to make clear. And I may as well add, there are no known shortcuts to riches. While the road to riches is well marked, it is rather long, and at places the going is a bit hard. These hard spots claim millions of victims who begin the journey, mainly because when the going becomes hard, most people give up and turn back, or drop out of the race entirely. Now, let us get on with my answer to your questions. The man who prepares himself to change from poverty to riches is something like a farmer who wishes to convert a forest into a productive field. He first clears away the timber and debris. Then he plows the ground and conditions the soil. After that, he plants the seed. But all these steps have to be taken intelligently and at the right season of the year, or no crop will be realized. It is precisely the same procedure with the man who makes up his mind to be done with poverty. He must first clear his mind of all negative and self-imposed limitations. Then he must take inventory of his education, experience, natural aptitudes, and general ability to see what he has to offer. After this, he must look for a market for whatever service he is capable of rendering. Here enters one of the more important of the principles of individual achievement, the principle of going the extra mile. I have never heard of anyone changing
Yeah, I'm not good at drawing horses.
without applying this principle and doing it as a matter of habit. Up to this point, the preparation has consisted mainly of the clearing away of the obstacles.
But yeah, that's my free drawing today.
Success.
Just a couple of drafts.
Is that of making oneself successful.
I like that Satoshi one actually.
Riches
That came out pretty good.
gravitating toward the man who has made up his mind.
But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Just like messing around a little bit. So
fear and discouragement.
I'm gonna go work on some other stuff now. In the next episode, we'll do like another 8-bit. I'm just not. Yeah, well, we'll see. Because I'm actually, I'm actually thinking of being a little bit conceited and doing a challenge where I do a daily portrait every day for the next 30 days. And that should actually be pretty interesting. So we'll see if I'll go through with that. Should be a good little challenge to see if I could keep up with it and think of like 30 different ways to draw myself. But yeah, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. This was a little bit of a free drawing episode with the crypto monsters as the topic. I just tried doing different stuff for a new idea that I had with my friend Chris. So yeah, anyways, I'll see you guys in that next episode where we'll be doing some self-portraits. So, peace, much love, and stay easy.
Riches which are sought